Has Netanyahu gone too far, or is he almost like Zelensky has trapped himself into this position based on things he said in the past?
Well, the problem of Benjamin Netanyahu is that, first of all, he's facing also court charges, and remaining in power is the only way to escape that. So for that reason, he still continues to proceed with his war and thinks that he is invulnerable at that stage. But this is probably not the case, and I think there are two aspects that we have to consider. First of all, I'm not sure he will defeat Hamas even if he enters Rafah. The Hamas is a very sophisticated organization. We have seen that in all the parts in which IDF has entered Gaza, they have not been able to control the territory they are on. So meaning that the Hamas is still very much in charge of everything there. So that's the first side, or tactical operational side of it. At the strategic level, if he enters Rafah, it will probably encourage the international community to consider definitively that Israel is committing genocide. And I think that's a very strategic, important thing, because the International Court of Justice already end of January established that there was a plausibility of a genocide. And since then, nothing indicates that Israel abode by the decisions of the International Court of Justice, and we are heading towards the accusation of genocide. And that would be catastrophe for Israel. We have to realize that what happened, if Israel is considered as a genocidal state, how will the U.S. still provide weapons to a genocidal state?
Yeah, I actually had a conversation last night with someone who said there was some interesting corollaries to the South African situation, where the U.S. used to be a blanket support to the South African regime, and all these comments about apartheid and all that. We would vote against any of that until it got to a period, I guess, a critical mass where it went over, and then all of a sudden we couldn't, and then we actually went, with, I guess, the global community, and it went against that, and we know how that ended up. Do you see something like that possible here for Israel? Yeah. Meaning, could Bibi Netanyahu push too far to where it actually undercuts his own support in the West?
Yes, but the problem is that, in fact, Israel may be even more isolated than South Africa used to be in the 60s or 70s. Because, in fact, when South Africa became isolated politically, especially as to weaponry and all that, they turned on to Israel. And in fact, you had a lot of Israeli weapons provided to South Africa despite the embargo. That was a huge issue. And I can say that because at that time, Switzerland was not in the UN, was not member of the UN because of neutrality and all that. And as a result, Switzerland still had contact with South Africa. And the South African intelligence had no contact anymore with European intelligence services, except with Switzerland. So we had very interesting discussions with we had discussions with the intelligence there at that time. I was invited in South Africa, by the way, to discover the new Soviet weapons that were tested in South Angola. At that time, because the Soviets had the most modern weapons tested in Angola, and the South African could get them, and we anyway. So it is another story.
Wow,
but
yeah.
what I want to say is that there was a very close relationship between South Africa and Israel. But today, Israel, it would be even more. They will not be able to turn back to South Africa, obviously, and they will not be able to turn to their allies. They have no regional allies, and even Jordan and Egypt are very. They had to sign a peace agreements with Israel, but they did that with a pistol on the head. But because the American forced them to sign agreement with Israel, they did that reluctantly. And I was even in Jordan for NATO a couple of years ago, and I had the opportunity to discuss that with a Jordanian military, and I noticed that they have absolutely no appreciation for Israel whatsoever. They were just obliged to have an agreement with them, so they did that to please the Americans, but certainly not to please the Israeli.
Yeah. And the real question is, how far will that compulsion go? And I think that there is an end to that, as well as several others.